the British throne, showing off his signature antics.
The moment the words left the walls of Buckingham Palace, the entire country froze. Not a rumor, not a tabloid whisper, but a chilling official announcement that instantly sent shockwaves through Britain and far beyond its borders. And the name at the center of this sudden storm was not the king, not the Princess of Wales, but the smallest royal whose laughter once echoed across palace balconies, Prince Louis. For years, the public had seen him as the cheeky spark of the royal family, the boy who pulled faces during royal ceremonies, the little prince who made crowds laugh when royal protocol felt too stiff. But suddenly the tone changed, dramatically, almost ominously. What Buckingham Palace quietly confirmed left royal watchers stunned, because this wasn't about titles, ceremonies, or royal duties. It was about something deeply personal, something painfully human, and something that had been unfolding behind palace walls long before the public ever suspected a thing. The announcement appeared without warning. No leaks, no hints from royal insiders, not even senior palace staff were prepared for it. In a monarchy where every word is carefully rehearsed and every statement planned weeks in advance, this message arrived like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. Within minutes, television networks across Britain cut into programming. Royal correspondents rushed toward palace gates with urgent expressions. Phones rang endlessly in newsrooms. Editors scrambled to verify the unimaginable. But because Buckingham Palace had just done something it almost never does, speak openly about a deeply personal family struggle. And at the center of that struggle was 7-year-old Prince Louis. The statement itself was written in the familiar polished language of the palace, but those who follow royal communications closely immediately noticed something different. The tone carried weight, real weight, not ceremonial concern, not polite sympathy, something far heavier. The words thanked the public for their compassion, while the family dealt with what they described as a personal matter involving Prince Louis. That phrase alone ignited an avalanche of speculation. What could possibly be serious enough for the palace to issue such a statement about the youngest child of the Prince and Princess of Wales? And why now? Across Britain, living rooms filled with uneasy silence as people replayed the announcement again and again. Many remembered the cheerful boy waving wildly from the balcony during royal celebrations, the child whose playful behavior had become a rare moment of genuine joy in the often rigid royal image. Now, suddenly that same child was at the center of something heartbreaking. The timing made everything feel even more unsettling, because the royal family had already been navigating one of the most turbulent periods in recent memory. The Princess of Wales had been quietly recovering from a serious health battle. King Charles himself had been facing his own medical crisis. The royal household had been under extraordinary pressure, emotional, public, and historical. And somewhere within that storm stood a small boy trying to understand a world that suddenly felt frightening. As speculation grew, reporters waited anxiously for someone from the family to speak directly. And then, something happened that no one expected. Prince William stepped forward. There was no podium, no elaborate royal setting, no carefully staged press conference. Just a father standing before cameras with a weight in his eyes that even the most experienced royal reporters had rarely seen before. For a moment, he said nothing. The silence alone told the story. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a fragility that instantly shattered the polished royal composure people were used to seeing. This was not the future king addressing the nation. This was a father trying to explain what was happening to his son. William admitted something painfully honest, something that sent a ripple of emotion across the country. Prince Louis had been struggling, not with royal expectations, not with public attention, but with something far more complicated: fear, confusion, and the emotional toll of watching the people he loved face frightening health battles. According to William, the signs had appeared slowly at first. Small moments that were easy to dismiss, restless nights, sudden mood changes, quiet sadness replacing the playful energy Louis was known for. But as the months passed, those moments grew harder to ignore. William described nights when Louis would quietly walk into his parents' bedroom long after midnight, unable to sleep, his eyes wide with worry, his small voice asking questions no parent ever wants to hear. The kind of questions only a child facing uncertainty could ask. Some mornings began with laughter and playful energy, just like before. But by afternoon, the mood could change completely. Meals would sit untouched, games abandoned halfway through. And sometimes, the young prince would retreat into silence, unsure how to express what he was feeling. William admitted something that made the moment even more painful. At first, he missed the signs. Caught between royal responsibilities and the emotional chaos surrounding the family, he believed his children were adapting as best they could. But one moment changed everything. William revealed a question Louis had asked him quietly one evening, a question so heartbreaking that even recalling it caused his voice to falter. The young prince had looked up at him and asked, "Will mommy leave like grandpa?" 8 innocent words. 8 words that carried the terrifying misunderstanding of a child trying to make sense of illness, absence, and fear. And in that moment, William realized just how deeply the uncertainty surrounding the family had affected his young youngest son. The palace walls that were supposed to protect the royal children had not shielded them from emotional reality. William admitted that hearing those words forced both him and Catherine to stop and reassess everything, their schedules, their routines, their priorities, because suddenly the monarchy, the duties, the expectations all felt secondary. What mattered most was the fragile heart of a little boy trying to understand a world that suddenly felt unstable. William then did something incredibly rare for a senior royal. He turned directly to the media, not with a command, not with royal authority, but with a plea. "He's just a boy," William said quietly. "Please let him have peace." The room fell into an uneasy silence. Veteran journalists, people who had covered decades of royal drama, suddenly found themselves disarmed by the vulnerability of the moment. But while William asked for privacy, events unfolding behind palace walls were becoming impossible to hide. Because what was happening inside Adelaide Cottage was even more heartbreaking than anyone realized, and Prince Louis wasn't the only child feeling the weight of it all. Behind the quiet stone walls of Adelaide Cottage, a different story was unfolding, one that cameras never captured and royal photographers would never show. Because while the world watched headlines and speculated about palace statements, the real heartbreak was happening in whispers, in sleepless nights, and in the fragile emotions of children who were trying to make sense of a world suddenly filled with worry. Princess Charlotte had quietly stepped into a role no 9-year-old should ever have to carry. For weeks, she had become her younger brother's silent protector. Staff members noticed it first. The way Charlotte would stay close to Louis during family meals, gently encouraging him to eat when his appetite vanished. The way she would sit beside him during quiet afternoons, trying to coax even the smallest smile from the brother who once filled every room with laughter. She tried to distract him with games. She tried to make him laugh the way he used to, but there were moments when even Charlotte's strength began to crack. One evening, according to staff inside Adelaide Cottage, Charlotte was overheard speaking quietly to her caregiver. At first, the words were soft and hesitant, almost as if she wasn't sure whether she should say them out loud. But when the question finally came, it carried the weight of a child who had been holding too much for too long. "He doesn't understand why she's not getting better." Those words traveled through the household like a quiet shockwave, because suddenly the truth became impossible to ignore. Louis wasn't just confused, he was emotionally unraveling. The lively little prince who once bounced down the stairs each morning with unstoppable energy had begun to fade into a quiet version of himself no one recognized. Breakfasts that once erupted in laughter now passed in near silence. His plate remained barely touched. Toys that used to cover the garden lawn were left abandoned. The same boy who once delighted crowds with his mischievous faces during royal ceremonies now spent long hours alone in his room, curled into the corner of a chair or staring quietly out the window. He wasn't angry. He wasn't rebellious. He was simply overwhelmed. Even Catherine, still recovering herself, could no longer ignore the silent crisis surrounding her youngest child. Close family aides described long, late-night conversations between William and Catherine behind closed doors. Conversations filled with concern, guilt, and the growing realization that the emotional storm surrounding the family had quietly reached their son. And perhaps the most painful realization of all was this: in trying to protect their children from the outside world, they had not fully seen the struggle unfolding right in front of them. One delicate suggestion soon surfaced during those private discussions: therapy, professional emotional support. It was a logical step, a responsible one. Many families quietly seek help for their children during difficult periods. But this was not an ordinary family. This was the royal family. And the thought of headlines dissecting the emotional well-being of a 7-year-old prince felt unbearable. What would the tabloids say? How quickly would concern turn into sensationalism? How long before the story became twisted into scandal? For days, the idea lingered in quiet conversations but remained unresolved. Yet doing nothing was no longer an option. Because outside the palace walls, the world still saw polished photographs, carefully staged family appearances, and smiling royal portraits. But inside the household, reality looked very different. A family that had always been trained to appear unshakable was now confronting a painful truth: vulnerability does not spare royalty. Titles cannot protect children from fear, and centuries of tradition cannot shield a small heart from uncertainty. Then came the moment that forced the family's hand. It happened during what should have been a completely ordinary school day. Prince Louis had been attending Lambrook School alongside other children, trying to maintain as normal a routine as possible despite everything happening within the royal household. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but during a simple classroom activity, something happened that no one inside the palace could have predicted. A classmate asked a question. It was innocent, curious, the kind of question children ask without realizing its weight. Is your mom still sick? For most children, the question might have passed like any other. But for Louis, the words hit like a sudden emotional storm. Witnesses say the young prince froze. He was hurting. And perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this entire story is not the palace announcement, not the media speculation, and not even the sudden withdrawal from school. It is the simple truth at the center of it all. Behind Behind the centuries-old monarchy, behind the glittering ceremonies and historic traditions, there is a little boy trying to understand illness, fear, and the possibility of losing someone he loves. And in choosing privacy over appearances, Prince William and Princess Catherine may have revealed a different kind of strength. Not the strength of royal duty, but the strength of parents protecting their child. As the world continues to watch every royal move and interpret every silence, one truth remains impossible to ignore. The future of the monarchy will not be shaped only by crowns and titles. It will also be shaped by how fiercely it protects the most vulnerable hearts within its walls.